is that we are not able principles of the time and apply them to the principles of our time. So at the time, God was building up his church, and he said organization was necessary. It was a reform that the church needed to go through, but they opposed the reform that God was building up into the church. What reform is God building up into his church today? And who opposed those reforms in the church? I tell you, the script is flipped. It is flipped. The professed Sabbath keepers who claim to believe solemn, important truth unite their forces with the combined influence of the powers of darkness to distract and tear down that which God designed to build up. What does God design to build up today? The church in the present truth, which comes with what? Various reformations and revival that is needed. But just as they oppose what God was building up, the reform that the church needed to go through, so today, those who are of the same characteristic of those, they oppose the reformation that God is building up in his church today. All right. What did we say last week? Let's look at this slide. We're at Matthew chapter 7. You remember what we discussed last week? What study did we do last week? You remember? We looked at the false prophets, right? Matthew chapter 7, we're just going to look at 15 to 17. It says here, beware of false prophets, which came to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. You shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns, thistle? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruits. And that is why we understand that the times and the seasons, we have to understand and apply principles. And the times and the seasons. Today, in time past, it was individuals who formed themselves maybe as individual or into groups and opposed what God was building up as he sought to organize his church. The church is now organized. From the church, those now who are organized oppose that reformation. Say, we want it the way it is. The script is flipped. We continue the same article here. It says, the agitation of the subject of organization. What did she say? They organized. And you must understand that this is why when you hear so much about church organization today. That's why you hear so much of it. The agitation of the subject of organization has revealed a great lack of what? Of moral courage on the part of ministers proclaiming what? Present truth. Follow me now. Because you cannot see these things without the guidance of the Holy Spirit. It's not possible. The agitation of the subject of organization has revealed a great lack of moral courage on the part of the ministers proclaiming present truth. Some who were convinced that organization was right have failed to stand up boldly and advocate it. So what is happening there? No, you have to make the application to today. So you had ministers at the time who were preaching what? Present truth. And we're coming to the heart of this right now. They were preaching present truth. God was building up his church. He was organizing his church. They knew that it was correct. But they had stiff opposition from influential men. But they lacked courage. They had no courage to stand up for the truth. Some who were convinced that organization was right have failed to stand up boldly and advocate for it. Those who were preaching present truth. They let some few understand that they favored it. So in other words, they carried them in a little corner and say, well, we agree, but they will not go public. They lack courage. Was this all that God required of them? No is the answer. He was displeased with their cowardly silence and lack of action. Now again, we have to make that application for today. They feared blame and opposition. The script has flipped, and if you consider these present truth pastors today, it's the same description that applies to them, but not in relation to organization. But in relation to what? Let's go. They watch the brethren generally to see how their pulse beats before standing manfully for what they believe to be right. Congregation that was favoring organization, they would preach organization. But if the congregation say no, they just don't preach even though they believed it. False prophets. Come now. The people waited. Watch this. The people waited for the voice of their favorite ministers. And because they could hear no response in its favor from them, what is the favor? Organization. They decided that organization was wrong. As they waited for their minister to see whether they would stand up for organization or no, they decided when they heard nothing from their ministers that organization was wrong. The script has flipped. What is the message for today? What is the message for today? This is not about organization where present truth is concerned. It was an issue then because God's church needed to be organized. The church is organized today. But what is the present truth for today in relation to the message that we preach? It's the third and the second angel's message. The first also, but more so the third and the second. More so the second that speak to a calling out of God's people out of apostasy. And those who preach present truth today, what do they tell the people? They are cowardly silent on the issue of calling God's people out of apostasy. They are cowardly silent on this issue. And what do they tell the people? Organization. The script has flipped. They know. The Bible tells that they tell lies in hypocrisy. Timothy.
Yes, some present truth preachers would have majority of their sermons on point, but on that point they would falter. So I'm wondering if it is a case where they truly know the truth and telling the people to stay, or they just don't know.
They know the truth. What did you just say? They have their thing on point. They are on point. You're correct. But were they not on point here also? They were on point. What was their issue? Organization. But they were on point with the message. And what else was their issue? Anything that had to do with organization, such as the tithe and offering and so forth. They had issue with those. Because when the church is organized now, it means that it goes to that central place. The issue at the time where present truth was concerned was that God was building up his church and it needed to be organized. But men there opposed it, and especially those who were a part of that message. Look at what Sister White said here. Some, blue words, some who were convinced, and the history of the past will be rehearsed. Some who were convinced that organization was right have failed to stand up boldly and advocate it. Why? They let a few understand. And you know, when you go to, even back to the whole sanctuary issue, the men believed the thing, but they would not go public. There's always a fear of backlash, a fear of what will be said, a fear of losing their salaries, and so forth. That's what was coming on. But today, the issue in present truth is about whether one remains in apostasy or no. And where does the apostasy exist today? Not in those who are carrying the present truth message, but those who are a part of the organized church. Now, does it mean that the church, present truth, is not organized? It's not organized into one body. But wherever you go, if the church is large enough, there is organization. Because when did they realize that, oh, we need to get organized? As the church began to grow. The same thing with the disciples. When the church, the apostle, the Christian church that Jesus established started to grow, they recognized the